Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Eating at a Meeting. Here's my little name badge. I am live at IMEX, and this is the first day of the show floor opening up, and which I'm not showing you at the moment, but I'm excited to sit here with Tori, even though it says Victoria on there. Chivers, Shivers,
Yes.
Who is the Vice President of Convention Services and Catering for MGM Resorts International.
It's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful, but and I'm going to put the title of what we're going to talk about up here too. So we got introduced because we did a panel together yesterday, with Mark Cooper, and when you and I chatted, like for the very first time, we're like, oh my god! I'm like keep telling everybody you're my new best friend.
It's great. Happy to be.
So tell everybody. You're vice president, and it's for MGM Resorts International. So tell everybody what that means.
So I get to support the teams who really make all the dreams happen with events. So convention services, catering events, restaurant group dining. I even dabble a bit in the wedding chapels and hospitalities. But it's really supporting a strategic vision and education for our teams.
And you have 400 people that work for you?
There's close to 100, just a little over 100 of the sales team.
Okay.
And then when you go into the banquet and operations side, there's a couple thousand. So
oh wow,
who actually execute and operate.
Okay, so and we're talking to meeting planners, but let's explain convention services and catering, the two different aspects of that.
So our properties are a little bit different. So
Okay.
we have a convention service team member who handles what I always call the left brain side of things.
Okay.
So the meeting room sets, the audio visual, any production, transportation, a lot of the billing. And then we have a catering event team who specializes in food and beverage and any of the meal periods, breaks.
Okay.
And I always say that's a little bit more right-brained, a little creative. They have to tap into, working with the chefs and the culinary team. And the education process is a little different between the two.
Okay.
But perfect partners.
Well, and they have to be, because it's all of the little details that go into that event. And I said to you, I think I said this to you, I'm like, we meeting planners, we come to you with an event, and then your event, basically your team are event planners, but for the hotel to make that all happen.
Yeah. And I love hearing you say that, because sometimes people think that they just take the information given from event planners and translate it, but really what they're doing is event planning within the property, and they have all the tools and resources to know about flow and everything that goes into the actual logistics of planning a meeting.
And they are also our connection to every single person in the building.
Yeah. Correct. Liaison for everything.
That's the right word.
Yeah,
liaison.
They do. Yeah. And in the different scale of properties we have, there is a lot of people that they interface with,
right,
and remain that conduit to make sure everything comes to fruition.
And because you got to make sure the lights are turned on, and you have to make sure the water's working, and and I just watched Corey walk by,
yes,
trying to figure out where the trash cans are going to go through for IMEX, and with those trash cans, the recycling aspect of this event, because IMEX is very much about the sustainability.
Right.
So it's mind-boggling. I don't know. I should turn it around and let everybody see what IMEX looks like, because it's huge. And yesterday they were saying 17,000 people probably are coming through here. Yes, for the next 3 days, which is mind-boggling in itself. All selling meetings and events.
Yeah. I mean, it's so impressive from our industry. I get excited every time that I walk in, and to think like the magnitude of what we do across the globe. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to talk. I do want to talk about the intricacies of meeting planners and CSMs, catering services managers. But I also want to talk about, because when we on the phone the other day, you were on a construction site.
I was.
And so the construction site was for the Formula One race that's coming to Las Vegas in when? November. Okay.
Just about 4 weeks away.
So how are you, as the vice president of convention services and catering, why are you on the construction side of that?
So, that goes back to the whole thought process of being an architect. If you're a meeting planner, a convention services manager, a catering event manager, we truly are the architects to make sure and protect everything that happens within a building, that the operations team can handle actually operating what we're putting in there. So the reason for me being there was truly to understand how are the tables going to get set up in this temporary structure?
Right.
How is the back of house going to look? That one's a little funky, which we don't even want to talk about because it backs up to Lake Bellagio. So
Right.
there is no back of house. We are actually going to use some of our boats to transport items. There's a dock on the back of it. It's pretty phenomenal, but nobody thinks about all those little things we have to go through to make sure the operations team can do it. Because, we have to stay in the good graces of the banquets and the culinary teams.
Right. Yeah. Because they have to feed all those people in those seats.
Yes.
Yeah. And those are the VIP seats, right? That you're building out.
They are. Yeah. 2 club levels that have 1,000 people each, and then grandstands for 1,600. So a total of 3,600 people that will be serviced at the front of Lake Bellagio.
Wow. And for everybody in front of Lake Bellagio, if you watched Ocean's 11, Ocean's 13, when they're standing in front of Bellagio with the fountains, so they're going to be sitting with that behind them, watching the race go on the strip.
Yeah, it's amazing. You see the turn coming down at Flamingo, goes across, and then it shoots back up Harmon, and you're 3 stories up. And you've got the backdrop of the fountains and the beautiful Lake Bellagio, and then the front of it is a Formula One race. I mean, it's amazing.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. So, I mean, that's really interesting too, because it's not, I love the fact that you're tasked with that, of how the MGM staff across the board is going to have to service those people in an offsite facility, but your in-house catering team,
right?
Which is, it's probably, that's something for them to all learn how to do differently as well.
100%.
Yeah.
There's been conversations that have happened for about 18 months on a weekly basis to lead them up to this.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
It's great.
Hi. Okay, so convention services and meeting planners. So for everybody, I mean, everybody that's listening is probably a meeting planner. So Tori, why don't I keep on? Because
Corey's running around.
Corey's running around. Tori is here. So the CSM is that person that we talk to when we get our event, and your team is the one that makes it all happen. But we have some pains that we always have. Meeting planners and CSMs always have some pains in working together. And I think one of the things is because they're the liaison to some of the people in the hotel, we have a hard time getting through those CSMs. They're really good gatekeepers.
They are.
Yeah. So what suggestions do you have for planners to work better with your team?
I think the first is to be incredibly curious.
Okay.
I think that sometimes when there's items looked at as being a gatekeeper, there's a reason behind it.
Okay.
And I always say to ask the reasons to understand. It's that old, seek to understand, but asking more questions to understand the positioning, and also making sure the CSM knows why it is that they're saying no, that it's not just maybe an old rule that's been in place that has just, evolved over the course of 30 years. So be incredibly curious, ask more questions, seek to understand, and then you're going to create a better partnership on both sides.
And we want our CSMs to ask those questions as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because, we always do it this way, right? And I was telling you a story about a different property where Corey was at, and we came in and he's like, well, no, you can't do that. And I'm like, what?
Why?
Why not? Well, because it was public space. And so, and that's a whole learning thing too, that I think meeting planners have to ask across the board in general. But so I think there's a lot of conversations too, is like the contract is signed, but we don't get to talk to you until after the contract is signed. And so sometimes that conversation between sales and convention services gets lost, or it doesn't get communicated. How can we improve that?
So that's one thing I think you and I feel like we've talked about this a few times, but it's one that I'm most passionate about, is having those conversations up front. The second the contract is signed, making sure that we start talking about the space layout, the flow, what the expectation is of culinary, the dietary needs that may come in with the demographic of group. There's so many things that should be spoken about, like within the week after the contract is signed.
Right.
And I think that's kind of a lost art, if you want to call it, that we've seen go away as teams have gotten busier, the volume's gotten higher of meetings. We don't take the time, and that hour spent will really save us so much time in the long run and later on.
Okay, and this is and I don't know how you are on staffing, but I've seen a lot of threads too that we don't get to know who our CSM is until really close to our event, and not right after that contract is signed. Because what about a contract that's signed 3 years out? That's really a lot different too.
It is, but I think we probably, in the current environment that we're in, we should probably look at getting those assigned sooner and having those conversations. I mean, we all know that you may end up getting moved or changed, but there should be enough simpatico amongst the team and the direction that's given from the properties that handoff will be seamless if it does need to take place.
And I don't know. I mean, you all make the things happen that we want to happen because you know how to make it happen.
We're also, our chairman is really big about the culture of yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And that is really inbred in our culture, our employees. And so you say that, but it's because we do believe in making sure we say yes to everything that you're asking us.
And maybe it's a yes and
yes. I did
not
say
a but.
And after that.
Yeah. Yes, and that's a lot of improv.
And we can do it this way.
Right, exactly. Yeah, a lot of improv classes there. Yeah. Okay, so one of the other things that you and I are passionate about are dietary restrictions.
Yes.
You sent me a list, and I could probably pull it up, but and I've seen worse, but collecting those dietary restrictions, and we talked about this yesterday in the panel discussion with the chefs and Mark Cooper, and they're growing. I mean, I've been doing this for 13 years, talking about this, trying to get people to pay attention to them, and actually I've been introduced like 3 times since we've been here. Tracy's the woman that talks about food allergies. And I'm like, okay, can you broaden that a little bit, please? I mean, it is my core, but what would be the best scenario for CSM to get the dietary restrictions, and how can we partner or work together?
So I love the template that you do education on. So I think that's a starting point, but I also love the podcast you did with the allergist. That was really enlightening for me. So
which allergist you remember?
She was the one she was recently in the last couple of months. She talked about the core of the 9 and understanding it being an allergy versus a sensitivity versus an intolerance, and understanding. I think that was important to know, because when building out the registration and some of the way that you educate is that, one, let's start with true allergies.
Right.
Like, what is an allergy and what are those 9? And let's start with the 9 that are most prominent in the world.
Right.
So, and then how that then peels off to different elements, to drilling down a little bit further to understand. So when you're giving the culinary team a list, it's very prescriptive, if you want to say that. Right. Here's the ones that we have allergies for. Here's the lifestyle that we're going to obviously accommodate in the same fashion, but this is what they're looking for. So you can almost compartmentalize for the culinary team what it is that's expected of them, versus just getting a list of 300 others.
Yes.
And then it's up to the attendee to type in what the other is. So someone who might be vegan will also put plant-based, who also might put, they're going to put their own words in that make it very complicated to what that means.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. And the people who add in, I only eat chocolate, right? Yeah. I'm like, this is a serious question that we're trying to feed people. And I appreciate that you like chocolate, but we will have chocolate there, but not, I don't want to kill it. Again, I don't want to kill anybody. And the chef doesn't want to kill anybody. Yeah.
And we talked with 2 chefs yesterday. The culinary team is so passionate about what they do, and they want to, I mean, you're talking about a group of artists who want to, they want to please people. They want to do the right thing. I mean, they wouldn't be in that business of being a chef if they didn't want to please the guests that they had in front of them. So giving them the tools to do that, I think, is just so important.
Right. Exactly. And it's, and the way I teach it, and reach out to me if you want to know, but it's like using check boxes, like having people check off what they need. And then with an other and some explanation too. But I think because where you are, I mean, I think you should actually do the top 14 because of the international attendance that you get, which adds, it separates the shellfish, but it adds definitely gluten and, oh my gosh, now I'm going to forget them.
I know, because that's...
Yeah. When I'm on the spot, I forget them. But sulfites, and mustard and celery, and because those are the ones from Europe as well. So, which celery and mustard are in so many things that they use. Yeah, which is hard.
Yeah, I think it would be great as an industry if we somehow could come together and give some basics. We know
Yeah.
every property is going to be different, but again, that's a conversation to have during the first couple
Right.
of weeks of
Right,
planning.
exactly.
How does the culinary team like to receive this before
Right.
we push out registration? What is the best way? It's going to make the event planner's job so much easier, catering and also culinary.
Right.
And the guest experience far better than what they are seeing these days.
Totally. Yeah. I'm like, here's your plate of carrots.
Yeah.
Is it important? I mean, I know your team is on the backside, but is it important for us to put that in the RFP for the salespeople? Because, and I'm going to say this because one salesperson I talked to who used to work here and does not work in Vegas, I should say, sold Vegas. She's like, I just want the heads and beds. I'm just selling the basic food and beverage package, and then that's your team's job to take over from there. Does it help?
I think if it was a entire group expectation, then that should be discussed up front. If it's not, I think the teams know how to accommodate it. Okay. I have a funny analogy, and it's been in the industry forever, but the sales team, I always look at it as building a house. So the sales team is the one who sells you the neighborhood and the land.
Okay.
And then you get assigned your CSM and your catering manager, who are your architects. So they're gonna talk to you about everything down to how many sinks you have in the house, what kind of windows you want, all of the nitty gritty. And then you move to the general contractor, which is banquets and culinary, who then actually do all the installation. But the sales team really is interested in getting you to the property, making sure that it fits all of your needs and it's the right place for you. And then, but they don't get into all the granular details that an architect does when they're building a house.
I like that analogy. That's a really good analogy. Okay, yeah. Because it is. Because I mean, we're in MG or Mandalay Bay now, and this is just a big empty space until today.
Yeah. But it's the right neighborhood. It's the right footprint. It's the right environment. They've done exactly what they needed to put IMEX where they should be.
Right.
And then after that, it gets passed off to actually do the build out of the event.
Very cool. And there's so many different people that come into play in that. I saw some guy walking up saying, I'm interested in doing I&D. And the IMEX guy is like, okay, well, go over here and talk to GES. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So then the catering side. So this is one of my biggest pet peeves, I guess, is the labeling.
Yes.
And I've said this on a couple of podcasts. In the past year, I've had two chefs tell me, well, I make the food, I don't label it. And then I had a banquet captain say to me, well, I don't cook, how do I know what's in the food? And how because your team is on both sides of that, how do we fix that miscommunication and that understanding? Because to me, those servers, your catering side, that banquet team, they're the front facing people to the attendees and the ones serving them. How do we fix that? Answer that right now.
I know. We've been trying for the last 10 years.
I know. It's hard.
Yeah, and we have gotten better. I mean, I know all of the labeling that's really requested by every event planner across the board now is to make sure that we list what contains.
Right.
And I'm sure you talk about this a lot, but talking about what it contains versus what it's free is important for everyone to know, because our labeling all says contains gluten, contains dairy, contains eggs. And we will have some planners who still come in and say they want it to say free. And that is just not fully transparent to the attendees if we say it's free.
Right.
So that's one piece, is to make sure that we're talking about what it contains versus what is free. And then the second piece of that is that as an industry, again, just like the registration process, we've just got to
find a new system.
Yeah, we do. We need to start to utilize technology, even all the way from the culinary, from the ordering side and the recipe intake, that will help the culinary team. Because one thing that's difficult for them is that they are on the floor creating, and they're not sitting at a desk writing out what everything contains. Like, a lot of their job has turned administrative due to that.
Right.
And a lot of our impacts, and I say our impacts meaning the property and the event planners, is the custom.
Right.
Because it's easy to do it when you're using retail menus, but when you change
Right.
to custom, now they're having to rewrite and reorganize
Right.
everything. But so we've got to find some kind of technology
Mm-hmm.
to help everyone in this process.
Right.
And I know
Yeah.
it exists and somebody's working on it,
Right.
but we need it.
We do. We need it like
We really need it.
yesterday. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard. I mean, and the only piece I'll say that we found success in is that culinary concierge,
Yeah.
where you have someone dedicated on the floor that knows
Mhm.
everything.
Yep. I can be that person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that works because
Yeah.
then they have the iPad that has
Yep.
everything. So anyone who asks,
Yep.
and I told you, I'm like, I shouldn't say it till we can actually execute it, but I really am interested in a QR code for attendees so they can text back and forth to someone even back of house
Yep.
next to the culinary team, because we've all become so used to, Siri and Alexa
Right, yeah.
and being
Yep.
able just to have an on-demand
Yep.
answer, that I think there's something in that
Yep.
could work.
Yep. Totally. And it is, and I remember doing it for an event in in Atlanta, and we have 15,000 people in Centennial Olympic Park, and I made laminated cards of every single thing that we were serving with every single ingredient on it, and I made sure that every chef or person in the 5 different tents that we had that, so we could answer the questions, because it is. And actually, my friend Joel Schaefer, who lives and teaches, he actually teaches culinary school here, but he was just at the food allergy conference, and they did everything was free of the top 9, every single thing that they served. I mean, they only did 1 or 2 meals, so it wasn't a lot, and it's about 300 people, but their signs were like 8.5 by 11 and listing all of the ingredients, every single ingredient to be seen, which I don't think is doable on a convention center size of this size. But if we have that laminated card that has the allergens, or we have it on a QR code,
Any way that we go out to smoke?
I have no idea. No, we're recording a video right now.
That's really the joy of live podcasts.
Exactly.
It's really live. It really is live.
Yeah, and I don't smoke, so I don't know where to go. Out the door. But it, having that information to me makes it just easier. And I know it's a challenge, but we need those systems.
Yeah, we definitely do. And that's where we found that even the iPad that they can carry around, or putting digital menus on their phone so they all have access to your point, is really, it's a benefit to the team, but it's that pre-work that has to go in, that administrative side to get all that done. I'm sure that didn't take you a small amount of time.
Oh, no, not at all. Yeah. No, it takes a while.
It really, that's where, how do we get ahead of that to make that easier?
Well, and it reminds me of yesterday on the show, I was talking to your colleague, Michael Gulich, and Eric Wallinger from Meet Green. Oh, we got a comment here. Yay. Who's this? Love that analogy. Yes, I love that analogy of building the house. Yes. I agree. And going down, Eric was talking about water bottles, and not even sourcing the water, but the water that's used to make the water bottle. Like, we have to get down that nitty gritty in our food and beverage as well when we're looking at ingredients. And there's so many things that say spices or whatever. And for some reason, that's just a top secret, for everybody. And that could be life or death for somebody, unfortunately.
Completely.
Yeah. But that's you and I are going to fix the whole food system.
Right.
Yeah.
We're going to start with just the registration process.
Exactly.
And then we're going to find someone out there who's building technology to assist us.
Exactly. We have to fix that. Okay. So then I want to talk about menus too, because this is like, I got a menu from a hotel, and because I do what I do, I'm sitting here and I've got these people with dietary restrictions, but I go and code all the menus because they're not coded, right? So I'm like, what can I read from this line item that says this, right? And then I'm like, oh, you have 14 dish. It was 30 appetizers. 1 was vegan. 1 was gluten-free, dairy-free. Otherwise, everything contained gluten or everything contained dairy. And I'm like, how can I pick an item? And that's a challenge. I mean, because then we have to really rely on you to do that information, right? But how can we also fix that to make it more on the planner side to figure it out?
Yeah, I think we do need to make it a standard to put what contains on menus now. I think that would make things just a lot easier for everyone, especially when you're trying to maybe make a menu that's 50% plant-based and you're going to pull other items.
Right.
Then you automatically know these are the ones that I can toggle over. So I think that should be a piece that we as venues and caterers should be focused on working on, because we can help contribute to some ease by providing that up front.
Right.
So I think that's one piece. And I think beyond that, we just need to really be cognizant of those needs,
right?
And putting those into the menus, like we talked about yesterday. It used to be that we had things that were 75% animal based,
right?
And now we're trying to shift that to 50 because we can accommodate so many lifestyles, allergies, everything by making that shift.
Right.
So I think those are two things venues and caterers should be focused on: is how to call everything out up front,
right?
And then how to also evolve your menus to be more inclusive.
That's a lot of people to train.
It is.
And you just have MGM. I mean, I think it's hard, and it depends on where you are in the country and what management company you are. And I, years ago, I wrote an article for a magazine, and I'm like, don't, just because it has one hotel brand name on it, don't expect that hotel to have the same as another one. And she's like, well, no. And I'm like, no, because it's owned by you and managed by me, right? With MGM, it's all corporate owned. So that's a different thing to think about. But for anything that's a franchise, that's a really different struggle to have.
And I have to tell you, we're really fortunate because we have both ends of the spectrum.
Right.
So we can test things out at our properties like Park, who have those beautiful little ideation rooms and communal areas for, stuff for feeding groups. And then you can also test different things on larger scale at Mandalay Bay. And somehow it all starts to meet in the middle, which I think is really, and I love it because it's also very concentrated here in Las Vegas. So there's a lot of conversation happening between our teams.
Right.
So I think, we're supported by our corporation, by having core values that we believe in, and then by having the ability to sort of pilot and test things out before official rollout.
That's cool. Yeah. And so for your role as the vice president of this, for a major corporation, what advice do you have for other CSMs, to do this and to have the passion that you have in doing this?
I think it's education, staying at the forefront. I think in our industry, you can't just rely on your experience and what you're seeing 365 days a year. You also need to be reading the trade publications. You need to be getting familiar with science and food. That's a piece that I think is interesting, that we don't read enough about or understand enough about. We rely on our culinary partners for that. But it's being a true expert. If you were selling pharmacy products, you would truly understand the science base behind those products. So we should be looking at food the same way we do.
That's interesting. I mean, and you're not going to go learn how the toilets work, but you're going to rely on the guy that in the building that does that. But I think culinary wise, that's the biggest part of that.
It is. And we are a sales centric team. And I think we have to remember that we are sales, but we are operators at the same time, but we have to understand our products to that detail.
I thought it was interesting. A couple of years ago, I spoke for the ESPA, Event Service Professionals Association, and the members are CSMs, but they're all from destination, from DMCs and DMOs, and there weren't a lot from hotels and convention centers, because they're the ones running the business, running. I mean, not to say they're not, the DMO ones aren't, but you have a hard time getting away from the building.
We do. We're really fortunate. Our chief sales officer, Stephanie, she believes in the CSMs and the catering managers traveling.
Okay.
So in the last couple of years, we've been trying to get in front of that because there's so much value in even coming to walk the IMEX floor and understanding, and even sneaking back and looking at the MEOs and the BEOs to understand how other people are doing things. There is so much value to that. I can't tell you how many kitchens, probably for many of you that are online, that I've snuck into and looked at how things are done. And I think that's just part of our curiosity and, in nature that we do that. But I think it's important to attend conferences as well as going out and seeing what's happening in our world. outside of the building.
Right. And I do think up leveling the job responsibility, and that we give it a better, because it does have a bad rap, I think, on the meeting planner side. Oh, my CSM, right? And it's just, but you are an event manager.
Yeah.
And I think I said this to you, in like, you all produce events 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, right? And we as event planners, we come in and our event's the most important. But I know one CSM, she's like, she had a 300-page BEO, and it was the system that she uses. She ended up quitting her job, and because it was so stressful, because the system was so antiquated, which is what you're talking about, they hired her back, but she's like, I only want to do this. I want to fix our system. And I'm like, that's a great thing. I need to introduce you to her.
Yeah.
Because she's like, we spend so much time behind the computer trying to figure this out rather than actually doing our jobs.
Yeah, and having the system set up properly
Right.
is really the key piece, even
Mhm.
down to the information we just talked about from
Right.
the culinary team. That would also help the catering team when
Right.
they are building things out or answering questions. But I can't tell you how many properties I've gone into and they have not set their systems up properly because of the time it takes, and because
Right.
we're so busy,
Right.
they can't take the time to do it. So finding those special people that are willing to take the time is huge.
Right.
And I do think everyone should find that person on their team who feels passionate about it,
Right.
to go in and fix it, because the time it will save all of their team members in the future
Yep.
is like,
That's what she said. She's like, because it's just, we're up out all hours of the night doing those things because the system is antiquated. Yeah.
It's like, remember when you used to not hire someone because you're like, I don't have time to hire them.
Yeah.
I can't do that.
Yeah, because we have to train them. Yes.
But then if you just hit the pause button for a minute, corrected all of that, got the hire in, then you're like, oh, why didn't I do this before?
Right, exactly. I need to do that today.
Yeah.
Myself. Yes. Exactly. Okay. Is there anything else that you think we should talk? Oh, alcohol and non-alcoholic beverages. We didn't even talk about beverages.
That was a big conversation
It
yesterday.
was. There was a couple. I was interested in the question. Where is that question? That somebody asked, why are the copper cups?
Oh, yeah. Chef Pete was going to look into that about
Yeah.
not using copper mugs. And I think it's just because the metal reacts with what we kind of determine to different things. And depending on what they're putting in it, there may be a reaction that that you may not want to ingest, or that just is frowned upon these days.
Well, and I also read it as like, well, give the people the non-alcoholic drinks in those copper cups. Then you're calling them out, in my opinion.
Well, that was one of our conversations yesterday. I think it's so important that however you address menus and however you're merchandising the back of your bar, that it just includes those things, because there's nothing weirder than if you're doing dry January even, or stuff that you may have a reason to require you not to drink alcohol, and you're like, hey, do you have a non-alcoholic beverage? You're embarrassed by it. And you shouldn't feel that way.
Exactly.
It should just be there.
Yeah. Well, a bartender says that. She's like, you have no idea how many people come up to me and go, can I just have a club soda with a lime?
Yes.
Or they get paid off. And actually, do you watch the morning show?
Yes.
And on one of the most recent episodes, the Asian woman, she went and paid the bartender, said, continue feeding them, and here's
when she was at a business meeting.
Exactly.
But I mean,
they
how
called
many
her
people
out
have
on
done
that?
Yes. I mean, or when you're pregnant and people don't know. I mean, there's several reasons for it that to your point yesterday, you don't just want a club soda and lime,
right,
and have to like whisper into someone,
right? Yeah. And I did love Pete's description, because he said he was sober for sick, and I have been too, but why do you make the drinks taste exactly like the drink? So those aren't necessarily for the people who are sober.
Right.
Those are for the people who are just choosing not to drink and want that flavor. But there's a couple of brands out there. I mean, I had an old fashioned, and I'm not a bourbon drinker, and I'm like, that smelled and tastes like an old fashioned to me, but that was spirit.
He mentioned that about his gin and tonic too.
Yeah.
That it was a little too close to home for him.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how can we, and I was at the restaurant show, and I was talking to one of the probiotic companies, probiotic soda companies. I'm going to say soda. And I'm like, how do you get into properties? Because they're contracted with two different brands. So how do planners, if they want to incorporate some of these non-alcoholic brands or these probiotic canned drinks, how do we get them in when there's a contract for another soda company?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, there should be some flexibility of adding products that the other soda companies don't offer.
Okay.
That should be one. The second piece is that because most of these products are coming in individual packages, the caterers should be able to bring those in, because it's not something that is perishable. It's not something that you're have in a large scale format.
Right.
So I think as venues, we should probably be doing a better job of having those readily available to you, especially non-alcoholic beers. I mean, it is amazing.
There's so many out there.
So many. I mean, everything you can get. Hazy beers. You can get IPAs. You can. I mean, you can get everything now. So that should be a standard, and you can get those from a lot of the contracted companies that the hotels already have agreements with. So that's one piece, and then some of the other items. I think I told you there's a fizzy forward hops tea that I love. That's a black tea, a green tea. Chef Pete talked about wild tonic, kombucha. So there's so much out there. I think hotels and caterers just need to get better about having a product, little repertoire that they can give to people to say, here's what we have to offer. Yeah. And it doesn't necessarily have to be non-alcoholic wines or, non-alcoholic, I don't know, spirits. I'm like,
spirits.
I know. I was like, what are we, because they're not a
liquor.
spirit.
Yeah. Spirits. Yeah.
Yeah. But there's a lot available.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. There's stores popping up of just non-alcoholic things. So, okay. You mentioned tea. So I think we'll end on this conversation, or maybe, I don't know. Yeah. Coffee and tea prices. So I actually had, some students at NC State do, a comparison for me of coffee prices across the country. And I'm looking at it here, like the average gallon of coffee from these 80 or so things was $111, which is to me not bad.
Yeah.
But I know that there are planners out there that are being charged $199 per gallon of coffee, and but you shared something really interesting to me about the tea, because people wanted to do it by the bag. So why are we paying $195 a gallon of coffee? Plus tax and gratuity.
The coffee or the tea?
Both.
I was like, "Ooh, this is a tricky one. I've got to
tread
lightly." First, I will say it is benchmarked to the current markets.
Okay.
And so I think that's the first piece of the pricing, is understanding what pricing, just like service charge, is in that area where you're hosting a meeting. But the tea, I was having the conversation with you, is actually there's higher cost associated to the tea. It's not so much about the hot water, as it is about the tea bags, the honey packets, and everything that comes with the tea setup. Right. And then on top of it, there's usually a higher consumption, because people people love to take the tea and the honey with them.
To take it back to their room and do it there.
Yes.
Okay. So there's not necessarily a higher consumption of the water. There's a higher consumption of the tea bags and the honey.
And the water does get consumed by a lot of people who just drink hot water. Several meeting rooms are cold, and you'll see people take hot water and just take it almost as
just to hold it on my hand. Yes.
So there's a lot of use of that hot water. It's a hand warmer and also a tea bag supplier for later.
Exactly. Is it reasonable for us to ask to pay by the bag?
I think it is, but the production that goes into it is identical, whether they do it on consumption or because you're already prepping the urns, the sterno, carting everything out. So I think that's why people are a little less agreeable to doing it by the bag, is because you're already putting out that entire spread, regardless if one person takes something.
Gotcha. Okay.
And we also have, we like to conserve our water. So, as you learned yesterday.
I did. We like to, and I was actually quite surprised. I mean, because Michael said about the water here in Las Vegas, he's like, we're going to be good for a while, because they've had this water plan in place for a long time.
Yes.
And really kind of managing. And I thought that was quite impressive. And the consumable and the flushable, basically the difference between the water and if you didn't watch yesterday, it was really cool. All the flushable water is actually, the stuff that goes down the drain is filtered and then sent back out to Lake Mead. So it's water treatment systems. Yeah.
Las Vegas has a very advanced water treatment system. It's amazing. So You're going to get this.
I am going to get this all day long or every morning. Can I leave here? Yes, that's an exit sign. Okay. So, all right. Is there anything that you would, 2 more questions. How do you want the relationship between a meeting planner and a CSM to be better? I mean, from a meeting planner perspective, how do you want them to bring stuff to your CSMs or to any CSM?
I think it's really just looking at a strategic partner. I think that changing the shifting of the information in and out and changing it to a strategic partner. The contract signers a lot of times are different. So how do you then put the event planner who's actually going to be planning the nuts and bolts of the meeting in partnership with the CSM earlier and start to have those conversations? I also would love to see more relationships being built and entertaining amongst the 2 groups, because I think that that just creates better simpatico, and a lot of conversations happen over dinner or lunches that aren't necessarily about going through BEOs or through event orders. So I think that looking at it as a partner and a relationship the same way the contract signer in sales looks at it is just incredibly beneficial to the overall program logistics.
Well, and I mean, I've seen Corey twice in 2 days, and I've hard hugged him, and I'm like, because there is such an important and valuable team member to me to make it happen. And I even remember doing it to a guy in the Gaylord. Like, I took my other client, and he's like, "Oh my God, you're here!" And so I do love that. Actually, one additional question just popped into my head. There was one. Some people are saying, and I haven't had this experience, is that some properties are taking the CSM out of the actual day-to-day execution of the events and making them only that person, and then we're only working with banquet captains or banquet managers. Are you seeing that as a trend, or is that because of staffing issues, or what is that?
I think it's the time in the office, and that goes back to when we talk about our jobs have become so administrative, from either culinary or event planners, meaning property event planners. They are now moving them, even in some cases remote, and they're having titles where they're called event planners instead of catering manager or a convention services manager. And those individuals are simply responsible for typing all of the BEOs. You see this practice a lot of times in third parties, but now it's coming into the hotels. So one person does all the work from an event order standpoint, signs off on all of it, and then they hand it over to a team who is their logistics tactical team, who then make sure all of those orders are
so that's a whole nother level of, we need to connect with those people too.
It's definitely being tested in the marketplace. I think that there's another layer to it. I'm not sure if it's just the old school in me that I'm adding more layers. I don't know if that's always as beneficial as having the cohesiveness of those one people who have that helicopter view of everything that's taking place.
Well, and if that's the person the meeting planner has been involved with, and then just throw them, and these people don't know anything that we've worked on. Kind of like with the sales contract to the CSM too.
So it'll be interesting how that starts to play out. And if there is some, I think there's always good practices in everything that are being tested out. But which pieces of that do we want to adopt, and which ones are going to make us better and stronger, versus which ones are going to add more layers or confusion to the actual operations team. So we're sort of we're observing those right now, trying to understand them, and then continuing to keep things where the event planners are working directly with the meeting planning teams.
Cool. Awesome. All right. So my final question for everybody is, what does a safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experience look like to you?
That's a long question. I was like,
you can break it up into pieces if you want. Safety, sustainability, and inclusion.
Well, I think that it has to meet all the objectives of the event and the planners. Because that could mean so many different things to so many different customers. So that is first and foremost, it needs to meet that. But I think, and the other piece is having freedom of choices and personal responsibility. Because the properties and the event planners can put everything out to make it what they interpret as safe, sustainable, and inclusive. But if the attendees don't have freedom of choice to make those choices, or they don't have the accountability, then none of that works. So That's my answer.
Yeah, no, that's great. I like the fact of freedom of choice, because it is, you don't want somebody, and even somebody that utilizes a wheelchair, right?
Right.
We have to make sure that experience is good for them because I say they have to get to the plate, and they have to also be able to be included in the plate.
Right.
What's on the plate.
Yeah. And it's meeting all of the goals of every attendee and meeting,
Right.
and what that means for that specific group.
Well, and complete tangent. I saw somebody yesterday, and she said, I really didn't understand the severity of this, but this is going to get complicated. Her child's boyfriend is freaking out about going out to eat because his cousin just died eating out. There was peanut oil and in something, and he had asked, and he administered the EpiPen, but went home and didn't go to the hospital. He died. He's 35.
Wow.
But her daughter's boyfriend is now because it's his cousin, is one of his best friends, is now really, really anxious about going out. And we need to make sure that we're creating those giving them the tools to be able to feel safe.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the comfort in being able to have those conversations and know that they're heard.
Right. Exactly.
A big piece.
So, okay. Anything else you want to talk about, Finbach?
I don't think so.
No, I think we covered a lot.
Yes.
All right. We didn't look at you very much, so
I know
that's how does the Today's
spot.
Show and all of that talk to each other and then talk to the camera. So thank you for tuning in. This is day 1 of IMEX, and I will be here tomorrow, same time, 9:00 Pacific, 12:00 Eastern, and I'm going to have planners looking at dietary restrictions. I'm going to have 2 that are here live with me in IMEX and 2 that are online, and how we manage dietary restrictions. So until then, stay safe and eat well, and thanks for tuning in. Oh, I was actually, you know what? Hide this, and then there's her. She's on LinkedIn. Find her on LinkedIn. Victoria, there's her name. Until then, stay safe and eat well. Thanks, everybody.